I'll call the regular City Council meeting for August 25th to order. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll now adopt an agenda. Ed, any changes to?
No changes to the agenda.
Can I have a motion, please, to adopt the agenda?
I move that we adopt the agenda.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We've adopted the agenda. The next item is the open forum. It's an opportunity for residents to address the council on the topics that are not on the agenda. Does anybody wish to address the council? Jerry?
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, thank you. My name is Jerry Martin. I live at 5440 Zumber Circle in Zumber Ridge. I'm president of the Zumber Ridge Homeowners Association. I'm here to publicly thank the City of Victoria, and in particular Ann Minke and the Department of Public Works and her entire staff. As you're all probably aware, we had some significant flooding issues on Lake Zumber this year. We had water literally up to the lower levels of people's homes, and Ann and her staff and also some just incredible volunteer firemen that came out on their own time and filled sandbags, laid sandbags, and just did an incredible job. So again, I just from the association and of all of our members, I want to thank the city and your staff. I speak from a professional background. I'm a retired Marine, so I know a little bit about professionalism and esprit de corps, and it was incredible. Every single person out there just was out there willingly and working hard, and no griping, no complaining, and it was wonderful to see. So again, I thank you, and we thank you.
Thank you for recognizing Ann and the fire department, Jerry. Thank you.
Thanks.
Ed, we have a visitor's presentation.
Yes. On July 1st, there was a new person that took the position of superintendent of schools for the Waconia School District. His name is Pat Devine, and Pat has asked to come and just share a few minutes with the City Council. So I introduce Pat Devine.
Thank you, Ed.
Welcome, Pat. I should, by way of full disclosure, I have a particular interest in what you're going to say. My granddaughter starts kindergarten in the Waconia school system in another couple of weeks, so I'm going to pay close attention.
Well, yeah, I better get it right then, right? Well, thank you for having me here, Mayor O'Connor and council members. Really excited to come to Victoria and get to know the council here, especially knowing that our school district has a portion of your city in our school district, and really want to make sure that we have a great partnership and a relationship with Victoria, so that the children that come to our school feel that they are a part of ISD 110 and are very welcome in ISD 110. Just wanted to kind of come here and get to know, maybe let you get to know me a little bit and give a little bit of my bio and who I am, and then and just again thank you for this partnership that we have. But Pat Devine, I'm newly hired, as Ed said, started July 1. Came from Litchfield school system. I actually go way back, grew up in a small community in South Dakota, but I also grew up in a large family. I was 14 of 15 kids. Learned how to communicate and collaborate and critical think real early in my life, and I think that's helped with my leadership skills. Graduated out of Black Hill State in South Dakota and went over across the border and taught in Wyoming for 4 years, taught math and coached over there. Went to Litchfield 26 years ago, coached and taught for 10 years, 16 years as a principal. During those last 16 years, I they asked me to be a middle school and a high school principal and run 2 buildings for 3 years. And then the last 2 years, they asked me to be a middle school principal and assistant superintendent, where I was in charge of curriculum and staff development and tech initiatives. So that kind of set me up to be prepared for the Waconia superintendent job. When that opening came about, my wife and I looked and said this would be a great community, great school district to be a part of, and we're just pleased and honored to be a part of the ISD 110. I am a little on the personal side, married for 31 years. My wife Kathy worked in the school system as a para. She's also a violinist that teaches violin lessons. We have 3 children, all adult. Our oldest son is a teacher up in Pillager. He's an art teacher and his wife's a math teacher. We have 2 grandsons from my son Dan, and they are McAllister and Leland. And then we have a daughter, Natalie, who is working out in the city of New York, a little small city out there, but she works in advertising, so she lives in Brooklyn, lives there, but she has a connection back to Waconia. She actually started dating a boy from Waconia in college, so when this happened, she said, boy, this makes it convenient for me, Dad. And then our youngest son just graduated from St. John's University, and that's kind of what started us looking for a new chapter in our life. We've always driven through Victoria, Waconia, that area, Highway 5, and went, boy, what a beautiful area. Wouldn't it be great to live here someday? And we never thought that it would come to play. We just dreamt about it maybe, you know? And then as this opening came, we did a lot of praying and a lot of hoping and putting all our ducks in a row, and everything came together. And the more that I've been in the position, the more it feels just right. It feels really good to be in the position. We have great leaders in Waconia School District. Programs that are in our district are really high functioning, and they have high standards. And I kind of knew that going in, but as I've been in the job for almost 6 weeks, almost 2 months, everything I do validates what I thought. When I talk to people, when I check into programs, it is very solid. It's a very solid school district, very great community. And to know that Victoria is a piece of that, I'm really excited about that too, because Victoria is a great community. So we want to continue to have a good partnership. I think Kathy Thome, a school board member, she handed out some information. We'd like to come back and present maybe this at a later date. We do have a referendum coming up in the fall. And as you start to look at our school district, it is just growing and growing and growing each year by about 120 to 130 students every year. So all the buildings are overcrowded, and we need to come up with a solution. So there is a bond solution that we'd like to bring forward to your council at some time and give you the details. But that's a little bit about me, a little bit about family, a little bit about Waconia Schools. But we know that every portion of our school districts is highly important. And one of the things that I gave some presentations to the staff, because it's workshop week today. It starts today, and I gave 4 different presentations today. And this resonates in me, and it always will, is that every person and every staff member is valued. And I look at our district the same way. If there's community members from Victoria that are in our school district, then they need to be valued. And that's I've started this quote that we are 110, and that's who we are. We're School District 110, and we take care of all of the members of our school district. Do you have any questions for me?
Questions for Patrick? Well, I'd just say, I think, we are really lucky in this city to be partnering with 3 very, very good school districts. And I urge you to make sure that we're not forgotten, and that you're not forgotten, and that we work closely together. And I think that, again, you're a critically important part of our service delivery system, and a part of the reason why people move to Victoria. So welcome, best of luck, and we expect to see you again soon.
Yeah, I plan on it, and I look forward to the relationships we'll build.
And good luck as the school year starts.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll take care of your granddaughter, okay. Thank you, Tom.
Red hair, you can't miss her.
Okay. Is she O'Connor?
a secret.
Okay, all right. I'll take a look for that one then.
And of course, we'd expect no special treatment.
Okay, right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And we have a work session tonight, so we're going to run, so thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll approve the consent agenda, adopt the consent agenda, where all these motions are approved with one motion, unless a council member wishes to remove anything. We've already decided that I think we got to remove the approval of the personnel policy, because we approved it in substance, but with some changes at a workshop prior to this meeting. Does anybody on the council wish to remove any of the other resolutions, any of the other items? I'll make a motion to approve the amended consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've approved the amended consent agenda. That leaves the approval of the personnel policy, which, Ed, you want to summarize where you think we are on that? As I said, we approved probably 90% of it, but left a couple items out for further study.
Yes, there were 2 items that were left out. Well, for background purposes, the personnel policies and employee handbook has been worked on for several months by city staff and consultants. And in general, I think the council's supportive of the policy and handbook. Much of it has to do with bringing it up to date in federal and state regulations. But the other thing was there are two major items. One is the sick leave provision for those that are new hires. The proposal had come in as discontinuing the unused sick leave as severance pay, but after some discussion, kind of went back and forth, and the council asked that we, rather than have that provision, perhaps we look at our salary structure and taking some of those funds and putting it towards higher pay at the start. And then the second thing had to do with recognizing the fire department as part of the holiday situation, where we award employees 4 hours of additional holiday pay in lieu of another day, and providing for a dinner for the fire department as a complimentary thing to do. So we'll bring back more information at a later date. Otherwise, the policy as presented was essentially approved.
I'll make a motion to approve the personnel policy as amended by Ed's comments.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We've adopted the essential elements of the personnel policy, and we'll await Ed to come back with those other couple of points.
Yes, thank you.
Next item is the approval of the claims roster.
I move we approve the August 25th, 2014 claims roster in the amount of $297,408.75.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We've approved the claims roster. Joe?
Can we just go back to what we approved with the personnel? So what did we just approve with that?
We approved
Everything but those 2 things?
everything but those 2
Okay, all
points.
right.
That's my understanding.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Too.
It can get confusing. Next, we have the second quarter financial reports for 2014. They're provided for information only. This is a new practice that Kelly started. Kelly, do you want to make any comments? Or do you?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll just make a couple of comments on them. This is the second quarterly financial report we've done, presented to the council, I believe it was back in May, and council had a couple of comments on those, so I've incorporated those changes. And I think what I'll do is I'll just briefly touch on the reports and not go into a lot of detail. The Finance Committee did review these at their last meeting. So the first report is on page 1, and that's the general fund statement of revenues and expenditures. Overall, revenues and expenditures are performing as we would expect, with the exception of our building permit revenue. That's coming in a little ahead of schedule. Through June, we had received payment for 45 new home permits, and we budget for 75. And just to kind of update where we're at to date, we're at 67 for the year, so I think we'll easily meet our budget of 75 new homes. So that shows up in both the licenses and permits line item and the charges for services line item. The plan check fees get categorized as a charge for service, so they're kind of broken out between two categories. And you can kind of see that in the chart on page 2. You can see that we've taken in about $250,000 in revenue for the year compared to our budget for the year. So we're at about 60% of budget halfway through the year. The recreation center is on page 3, and for that fund, our revenues and expenditures are also performing as expected. And I just would note that for our memberships and daily passes, we've received over $75,000 for the year through June, and our budget is $88,000, so we'll easily meet our budget expectations for that category as well. Page 4 is the water fund. And as far as utility sales, we are on track for what we'd expect. The second quarter typically is our second highest quarter of usage. Indeed, we were a little bit higher than last year's usage, even with all of the rain we had in June. We pumped about 52 million gallons of water compared to 51 million in the prior year. And then another item I would note...
Would you just before you get off that point, just for everybody's benefit, we use more water in June this year than we did last year. And later on in the year, we're going to talk about another storage tank in the range of $2 to $3 million. Our water usage is beyond, it's out of control. We exceed all of the stated norms and objectives from the DNR and from the DNR for one. This is going to get a lot of attention as we get into the water utility fund, which will be...
Probably next month we'll start.
Next month. Just so everybody's kind of on notice. Go ahead.
The other item I'd note on the water report is our water availability charge. And this is the charge that developers pay at the time a final plat is signed. And we had budgeted about $381,000 for the year, and we've actually taken in close to $612,000. And that's just due to the number of plats that we've had go through in the last 6-7 months of the year. That money is set aside to help pay for improvements such as the storage tower, new wells, and then also help to pay the debt service we have on our water treatment plant. The sewer fund is on page 5, and again, we're meeting our revenue targets for the year. One item of note, if you look under capital outlay for sewer core and construction, we are over budget, and that is due to the Wasserman project, and everyone is aware of the extra expenses we've incurred due to the poor soils and the easement acquisition. Nothing really to note on stormwater. Both revenues and expenditures are performing as expected. I've already touched on the utilities and the water consumption, so I won't go into a lot of detail on that one. And I won't really touch on the cash and investments allocation other than since we are going to be receiving our bond proceeds, we have begun to reinvest in CDs, so we should see a little better interest rate revenue from that. And then finally, the last page is, second to the last page is the status of our capital improvement plan items. If you look under the Public Works capital equipment line item, there's a purchase of a tool cat that was going to be presented in August. Obviously, that has not happened. With the purchase of the dump truck, the Public Works Department is looking at purchasing a Bobcat now, which is less expensive. and will also provide us with some needed snow removal during the winter months. And then the second command vehicle for the fire department, that was approved at the last council meeting. Okay, now we're on the last page, page 11, the bonds outstanding. And one of the requests at the last council meeting for the financial statements was to add the, where we were at our peak for debt. So I've gone back to 2010 and 2011, and at that point we had almost 40 million in outstanding debt. We've reduced that down. We're in the low, we're below 30,000 right now when you factor in the interest and, or the principal paid this year. So just wanted to note that our debt has gone down, and even with the debt, we do have planned for street and utility reconstruction projects and the city hall debt that will be approved. It's still going to continue to decrease each year.
And that includes the refunded debt as well?
Yes, these numbers do include refunded debt. So with that, I'll take any questions on the financial report.
Questions, comments? Thank you, Kelly. Item C on the finance section, the award of the EDA lease revenue and limited tax bonds, the Series 2014A. Ed, do you want to lead this, or?
In the EDA session, it was explained that the lease revenue bond sale took place, and we're asked the EDA to approve the EDA lease revenue bond, and now the City Council would do the same. The sale was of $2,850,000 in EDA lease revenue and limited tax bonds.
Yeah, for members of the audience, we had a detailed discussion of this transaction at the, as part of the EDA meeting, Economic Development Authority meeting. This is essentially the other half of the transaction that we're going to be approving now. But I'd open up, council, have any questions or comments? Somebody want to make a motion to approve Resolution 1464?
I move we approve Resolution 14-64, resolution authorizing, the execution and delivery of a ground lease and lease purchase agreement, and approving and authorizing special benefits, levy, and issuance of lease revenue and limited tax bonds and execution of related documents.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We've passed now the other half of the financing transaction. I just want to make one further point here. Anytime there's a major financing like this, the first question that most taxpayers, most residents ask is, what's the impact on me? And a couple of months ago, there was a lot of confusion, a lot of noise, if you will, about the more expensive financing route that the City Council had adopted to finance the City Hall and Public Works. I think at the time we tried to make it clear that that was the initial proposal was simply that, an initial proposal to get the conversation started, and that we needed to do more work on refining the financing approach, and we think we've accomplished that. On balance, there was $6.2 million of total cost, and $3 million of that was for the Public Works building. I'm sorry, yes, $3 million for the Public Works. We decided to use cash to fund that. The remaining $3.2 million was what we've just discussed now, financed through lease revenue bonds. The impact to the taxpayer is essentially, it comes down, it's about, the difference in total annual cost is about $9,000 versus the use of general obligation bonds, the cheaper quote-unquote approach. By using the lease revenue bond approach, the total impact to the median value homeowner is $2.64 a year. $2.64 a year for this brand new City Hall. I think we've accomplished our objective with this financing approach.
Well, in addition to that $2.64, we're also dramatically reducing a potential liability related to the safety of the two existing buildings. The hazardous, you see going to City Hall, you see the plastic walled off over there, and condition of the Public Works facility. If you tour that, you'll see the issues there. And in addition to that, we're putting the city then in a position to continue to maintain our current service levels as well as grow those service levels as the city grows for $2.64 per hour.
Any other comments or questions? Let's move on to donations. Somebody want to make a motion for the donations?
I move that we approve resolution number 1465, a resolution accepting the donation from the CC United Soccer Club for $600 designated to the Park and Recreation Fund. Thank you to them.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We've accepted the donation. We have no public hearing tonight. We can do unfinished business. The Main Street Building Site Plan and the Building Materials Review submitted by Heartland Communities located at 7940 Victoria Drive.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'd like to introduce Ben Gazzola. Ben is with Samba Tech, and he is our interim planner while we search for a new community development director. Ben has been on the job for about a month and has been working through various development and planning issues, and he has the reports for the planning items tonight. Ben?
Thank you, Ed. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, it's a pleasure to be here tonight and finally meet everybody. The application before you here is the final step in the development process for the proposed Main Street building at 7940 Victoria Drive. As you can see up here on the screen, it's located just to the east of the City Hall building that we're in here tonight, as indicated by this brown square. As you may recall, the city did approve a minor subdivision back in December of 2013 to accommodate this particular proposal, and later approved a conditional use permit that was necessary for the off-site parking in April of this year. The final approval needed before building permits can be issued is the site plan and building materials review, and that's exactly what's before you here tonight. This particular graphic shows the existing conditions with the site plan overlaid, so you can see where this new building is in relation to the existing City Hall. Also in your packet is this graphic, which is the ultimate site plan showing the removal of City Hall and the ultimate parking lot that was approved back in April. The final design has yet to be put forward, but that will be handled with the city engineer. And here are the elevations that we are discussing tonight. These two elevations are the east and west views of the building, and you can see because along Victoria Drive and on the City Hall side of the building, this is a very visible structure within downtown, that the applicant is proposing really dual fronts. Both of those fronts, to the east and west, will be brick facades. To the south of this building, the applicant proposes a 10-foot walkway to provide access to the front and back of the buildings. And on this bottom elevation, off to the north, you can see what appears to be two decorative garage doors, and those are garage doors that are decorative simply to hide the dumpsters that are necessary for this building. If we switch to the north and south elevations, the south side, shown on the top, is going to have fiber cement lap siding with the brick from the front wrapping around both ends of the building. And you can see some architectural detail from the storefront along Victoria Drive, as well as kind of a decorative strip down the middle with windows on the second story. When you go to the north side, you can see this side is going to be rock face, and it's going to be rock face to allow for future expansion. But to make it nice in the time being, the applicant is doing shading to kind of mimic the look of the building on the south side. Shading with both the middle stripe here and then the areas where windows could potentially be built if there isn't expansion to the north in the future. Now both the staff and the Planning Commission are in support of the plans that are before you tonight, and we are both recommending approval of the plans with some minor conditions on how to deal with signage. The Planning Commission's main focus during their review at the Commission meeting on the 19th was on the code provision that allows for horizontal lap siding with a maintenance-free painted surface. Well, ultimately, both staff and the commission did find that the proposed materials in this particular design was in line with this requirement. There were members of the commission that wondered how a painted surface could ever really be considered maintenance-free, given that if you paint something, it obviously has to be painted again at some point in the future. And the final conclusion was that the intent of code was really to require high-quality building materials, long-lasting materials like hardy board, like the material that's before you here tonight. And the other factor was such materials like that are always warranted to be painted for quite a long time. So while the commission did share staff's recommendation of approval, they did ask for council to verify your agreement with their assessment of that particular code provision. And with that, I will turn it over to council for questions.
Let me start with the first question. Do those facades, those elevations blend conceptually, contextually with the rest of downtown?
In my short time here, and having gone through downtown a few times and looking at these plans, they do appear to be, I would say, very nice. And I would think that they will blend in with the existing structures that are downtown.
Well, that was the impression I got from the material presented. Other comments or questions for Ben? Somebody want to make a motion?
If I can get to the right page, sorry.
Here. I move that we approve resolution number 1466, approving the proposed site plan and building materials for the Main Street building located at 7940 Victoria Drive.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We've approved the site plan and building materials. Now build it, Terry. Harbor Woods?
Ben, wouldn't you handle this one also?
Thank you. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, the next item before you is the Arbor Woods Plan Unit Development. It's being brought forward tonight by the Meridian Land Company. The development would be located at 8121 Bavaria Road, as you see on the map up here on the screen. The property is centrally located within the community, really on the eastern side of the city, and it's at the intersection of 82nd Street and Bavaria Road, both of which are county state aid highways. We have 18 running east and west, and then County State Aid Highway 13 running north and south. Right to the north and east of the land proposed to be developed, which is essentially this area here, we have the Applewood neighborhood. There are actually 4 different requests that are being considered simultaneously here tonight. We have the rezoning from agricultural to residential. We have a preliminary plat, we have a final plat, and then we have a conditional use permit to authorize a plan unit development. In general, the site before you tonight is 19.4 acres in size, 11.12 acres of which would be deeded to the city in Outlot A, which is the outlot you see on the screen now. Outlot A encompasses approximately 9.7 acres of wetland, as well as the required buffers that surround both the wetland and the ponds that are being proposed. And Outlot A is also contiguous to similar land that's already been deeded to the city for similar purposes, so we do find that this dedication is in line with your requirements. Zooming in on the lots to be developed, we see that the applicant is proposing 15 single-family home sites. These home sites run from just over 10,000 square feet to just under 17,000 square feet. They are proposing 2 outlots, one here, which is Outlot C, which kind of connects to the proposed local road, over to an Outlot B. And these 2 outlots are being reserved for the possible expansion of the Emerald Crest facility, which is just north of this intersection on the corner. In all, 2.41 acres are being dedicated for right-of-way, both for this local road, which is tentatively being called Arbor Woods Road. There's a portion of right-of-way that the county has asked for along 82nd Street, and then a portion of right-of-way along Bavaria Road. Now, a site plan view of the proposed development just further highlights what we expected to see when we began our development review. These are lots that conform to the standards that are typically approved by the city. We have a good variety of housing types, including full basements, lookouts, walkouts. And these lots are clearly going to fulfill their purposes for single-family home sites. Second, we found that the application of code to date does appear to be in line with the purpose and need section of your city code for plan unit developments. But unfortunately, we also came to a third conclusion, and that was that the specific wording in code relating to the give and take within a PUD really reads in a manner that currently prohibits flexibility. And if we take a look at the language in question, this is the language that dictates density and lot sizes. And we just read, some single-family detached cluster housing units may be allowed at the sole discretion of the City Council when at least all of the following are met. And then this language is followed up with 7 separate characteristics that if all of those characteristics had to be followed, suggest that the city would only consider lot flexibility in really the most extreme of circumstances. So that's really our first clue that the intent of this language likely differs from how it actually literally reads. The second indicator that we're likely just dealing with a grammatical problem here tonight is the fact that the passage in question uses the phrase "at least." I've tried since the Planning Commission meeting to come up with a scenario where I'd use the term "at least" when I'm talking about all of anything, but it's just unnecessary. You'd never use that term unless you were talking about less than all. So the bottom line, what I can say here tonight is that the proposed subdivision is consistent with what I believe the city's expectations are, that the proposal is consistent with the general design that was before you at the concept plan and was called acceptable at concept plan. But unfortunately, the plat just won't be compliant with code until the language we've identified is slightly amended to allow the city's standard practice. And in the short term, this is what both the Planning Commission and staff would recommend, and that's simply eliminating the word "all" in favor of the word "one." Making this change would reopen the door to facilitate lot size and density flexibility for this PUD and for other PUDs like Cray North, which we'll talk about later tonight. And then following this proposed quick fix, we'd also recommend that eventually the city take a look at really overhauling the entire PUD ordinance. But those changes and those discussions really shouldn't hold up developments that are already in the pipeline, which is why we offer this up here tonight. The Planning Commission did formally recommend that Council initiate a text amendment process to address the language as proposed. And while that process is going on, we will continue to work with the applicant to tie up a number of loose ends. These are different aspects of this proposal that we're going to delay consideration of these applications here tonight anyway, despite this other code issue that we've identified. But the way we are structuring this potential change to code, we believe we can run everything concurrently such that we can work with the applicant to address the issues that I'll go over here in a moment, bring a code amendment before you in September, and have everything hopefully wrapped up in front of you by September 22nd. And I'm going to continue to go through the report so you can hear the different issues that we have identified. But if you have questions about this, I'd be more than happy to address those after the presentation. So moving on, first just talking about proposed setbacks. The setbacks here are slightly different than what you have in your normal underlying residential zoning district. Currently, the underlying is 35 feet, and they're proposing 25 feet. Your report does say 30 feet, but since the Planning Commission meeting, I've talked with their surveyor, and the plans do indicate 25 feet, and he indicated they did that to bring the lots in and preserve more trees on the site. So ultimately, I think that's a good change. The interior sides would go from both side yards having to equal 30 feet down to 10 feet each. And I would point out that the nearest neighborhood, the Applewood neighborhood to the northeast, has very similar lot sizes and setbacks as is proposed here. The maximum building height in this development would be 35 feet. Maximum impervious surface coverage would be 30%, and there are no proposed restrictions on bulk of homes through floor area ratio requirements. Your code does require that each house be able to provide 2 interior parking spaces, and the design of these lots, both width and depth, suggest that this won't be a problem to achieve. The applicant did indicate they would like to build an entrance monument here, but the plans as currently before you tonight do not provide for the necessary outlot for that. So they are going to be updating the plans to provide that outlot and also be working on establishing a homeowners association to both own and maintain that future structure. This particular development is not going to impact the development to surrounding lands. All of the surrounding land is either developed or it's in wetland area that can't be developed. And we also did have a neighborhood meeting prior to me coming on board, and the feedback we received at that meeting really focused on drainage, tree preservation, wetlands, and then osprey and bald eagle nests that might be in the area. And I will address each and every one of those here as we go forward. Moving on to infrastructure, there is the one new local roadway, as well as the dedications that I pointed out earlier. The county will be requiring turn lanes, as you see down here at the bottom of this particular plan set, but the county has not provided us with comment yet on the preliminary plans, so both us as city staff and the applicant will continue to try to get those comments back to us as early as possible, so if there are changes, we can make sure that they are before you in mid-September. The entry point location is acceptable because it's a safe location, and it also brings the entryway outside of the treed area, which will help preserve trees on this site. And the county is also on record that the entry could at some point in the future become a right-in, right-out entry. So we do intend to require disclosure of that as part of the future developers agreement. Municipal sewer and water are available on this site, and you will see on pages 7 and 8 of the report a number of plan revisions that we are asking to be implemented prior to this coming back in September. The applicant has also provided plans for stormwater and grading, and just like the sewer and water, we are seeking a number of plan updates here. The one thing I will say about all of these items is that in general, these plans are going in the right direction. With regards to utilities, they will be all underground. Local street sign will be needed, and a lighting plan is yet to be submitted, but that's another piece that we've asked for, and they've indicated will be provided to us shortly. With regards to environmental and other neighborhood impacts, the number of units being proposed does not trigger mandatory EAW, and we did not identify any unique impacts here that would trigger a special environmental review. Wetlands were delineated, but we have yet to review the delineation report. It is forthcoming, and that will be subject to review and approval by the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. And then tree preservation. Based on this tree inventory that was provided by the applicant, the percentage of tree removal, even with all of the things they're trying to do to save trees, is still going to be about 46% to upwards of 50%. And based on your code table, the replacement rate would then be half, 0.5, so half an inch for every inch removed. So based on everything that's being removed in that replacement rate, approximately 1,280 replacement caliper inches would be required. The planting plan in its current state identifies 300 caliper inches to be planted on site, so the remaining approximately 980 caliper inches would either need to be planted off-site or a cash in lieu payment would need to be made. The only other thing I'd throw out here is that on this plan, typically the city will require a silt fence be placed around the protected area, which is shown by this dotted red line on the map in front of you. And one thing that I am recommending and would like feedback on here tonight is to supplement that with a snow fence as well to be more visible to the large earth moving equipment that's out there. It's very easy for those machines to run down silt fence and bury it, and then you very much blur the lines as to what's protected and what's not. So that extra visual aid oftentimes helps. Oops. And then my final comment on the environmental issues would be in response to the feedback on the possibility of osprey nests or eagle's nests, is that we would propose to add a condition to any future approval that construction would have to adhere to both timing and noise restrictions if they're applicable, and we'll have to look into location of nests. On charges and fees, there are no planned parks to the area, so the park dedication would be met through cash dedication. Following code procedures, we estimate that that would be about $39,000. There are two trails involved with this particular development. One is proposed, which would be east to west along 82nd Street. We'll have to look at where that is in relation to the right-of-way being dedicated down there. If we need an easement, we will have to get that and credit that to the developer. And the cost of the trail would be credited. The other trail is an existing trail along Bavaria Road, and the Alta title work in the Alta survey for this property indicated that that existing trail is not currently on an easement. So we got our eyes on that. If we need to take an easement there, if it's not within that extra right-of-way along Bavaria Road, then that would be another recommendation from staff. Finally, the park facilities improvement fee of $2,500 a lot would also apply, so about $37,000 based on 15 lots. We do not have a developer's agreement in front of you tonight because that was premature, but we will have one before you in September. So in conclusion, because of the recommendation to initiate the minor amendment to the PUD ordinance, the Planning Commission did elect to table all items and requested that the applicant address the issues that have been brought up by staff here tonight. For the benefit of the applicant and staff, we are asking the council to provide feedback tonight on the proposal, even though there really isn't anything to take action on. That way they can address any other issues that you've identified. And likewise, both staff and the Planning Commission are seeking your approval here tonight to move forward with the recommended code change. And with that, I'll turn it over for questions.
Let me start. How many PUDs would you guess, Kara, we've approved with the faulty language? The all versus one.
Yeah, if I understand correctly, that language was put in place in late 90s. Somebody noted today who I was talking about with it, I can't recall.
1997.
So when you think back to what didn't exist then, that would be all of Allegheny Grove, all of the Woodlands, all of Lake Bridge, all of Savannah Valley, all of Lake Town. I mean, there's been a lot of development that has occurred
Does
with
precedent,
that language.
does that kind of precedent, I guess what I'm trying to get here is, we have a reputation for dealing fairly with developers, but being problem solvers.
Absolutely.
And I want to look for a way that we solve this problem, assuming it's the only problem that faces us. I guess I'd ask council, if we've been operating this way for 10, 15 years, does precedence work in our favor here? Do we have to delay, do we fix the language to make it totally accurate? Or can we proceed with the faulty language knowing what we really mean?
Well, Mayor and Council, let me answer the procedural part sort of first. I'm not sure that there is a delay that we're faced with at this point. It sounded like from the planners, from Ben's presentation, that Planning Commission has not acted yet, has tabled action, and that action is pending. I don't know how many of things you need at the Planning Commission level, but several items need to be brought forward to Planning Commission in addition to the code amendment language. So I don't know that there's sort of a ripe application in front of the City Council right now. So procedurally, I don't think there's a slowdown. But putting that aside, your point, Mayor, is well taken. The black letter law answer to the question is, do we establish precedent in zoning decisions when the city acts and interprets the code or applies the code in a certain way? Legally, the answer is no, but no one thinks that. In practice, of course, people believe that cities are going to apply their code evenly the same way all of the time, and so practically speaking, cities get concerned about precedents being set. So your question is well-founded. Again, though, I think the answer is that even given the perception, I don't think a precedent would be set even in that sense, because what's happened is the city has not, over the years, as I understand it, and I don't have a great deal of background with it, but as I understand it, you've simply not, as strictly as possible, enforced this language. You've not read the language verbatim to say you have to meet all of these conditions, and instead have read it more liberally to say that you have to meet some or one of these conditions in order to get a PUD. And so that would not set a precedent. All of that said, we've talked, Ben and I and Ed have talked about this, and I think we all have a fair amount of experience from other cities with PUDs. And I will tell you, I'll speak for myself and let the others speak for themselves, the language that is problematic, the language where we propose to change one word of your code from all to one, that language is simply not consistent with what any of us have seen in PUD ordinances before. And so I don't want to claim that it's a mistake exactly, but it is certainly not the way PUD language typically reads. The point of a PUD, the point of a planned unit development, is to give the city a fair amount of flexibility in allowing developments to proceed, and this language, the word all in this sentence, greatly restricts, read verbatim, greatly restricts the city's flexibility. And so the proposed change here is really to make the code read the way PUD codes should is the wrong word, but you understand what I'm saying, should read, given the point of a PUD.
Am I correct that as code is currently written, a developer to have a valid PUD must meet all 7 criteria listed in 30-676? Is that correct?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, again, now we're looking at one particular provision, the density requirements that would otherwise apply. This language gives the city flexibility on the density requirements. It's not all the other requirements, just related to density. But you're right, Council Member, this language read verbatim says you must meet all A through G in order to get density flexibility. And that is in practice not what a PUD is intended to do. It's not the practice of the city in the past, as I understand it. I don't know about prior PUDs, but I am told anecdotally that that is the case. So,
Any responsible reading of that, somebody saw O-N-E and typed in A-L-L, and we've just missed it over the years.
Well, and so back to my question. So what exactly is it that this development does not meet, given the current requirement for all? Is it the yellow highlighted section under development standards and the density?
Councilman, I can jump on that. The provision in question is the subdivision 4 on density, and that particular clause specifically says all lots shall have a minimum size of 15,000 square feet. In this particular case, we are anywhere from just over 10,000 to just under 17. And if you look at the whole, 2/3 of the lots being proposed do not meet this 15,000 square foot requirement. And the only way we can get around that is through this cluster housing option. And to do that, we need to meet, hopefully, should this move forward, one of these criteria, which we can do to provide that density flexibility.
Sorry, I may not have the background to fully understand this, but if we look at your recommended change, going from all to one of these, that means any one of these statements within this very broad section
Yes.
would allow us to implement a PUD. Isn't that a little too flexible?
Well, it's not to implement the PUD. Really, the change we're talking about is to give the city the sole discretion at deciding on whether you want to provide flexibility in density. So we're talking number of lots and overall lot size. If you don't change it, then you are going to be held to this shall clause of having a minimum of 15,000 square feet. I would say yes, changing it to 1 provides a lot of discretion, but where the city council still has protection is the fact that it's under your sole discretion as to whether people can take advantage of that. So you can still use your best judgment with any future application as to whether to provide that flexibility.
I'm sorry, I'm still not getting it. So let's back up here. So we have sections 30676, 677, and continuing. The statement or the preamble that is of concern that says all.
Mhm.
Which sections does that apply to? All
This
of them
is
or just one?
section, no, just one section,
Alright.
section 30-678, entitled Development Standards, subdivision 4, which deals with density and PUDs, in all PUDs.
Thank you.
Yes.
So page 2 of 20 in that.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I'm looking at it. I just want to make sure that... Sorry, I'm a little slow.
No.
yeah, no, Mayor and Council, just as you're looking at that, Council Member, I mean, note that the preceding numbered paragraphs 1, 2, and 3 relate to flexibility on other zoning planning issues. So paragraph 1 relates to size, size of, help me out, size of lot. 2 relates to uses that would be permitted. 3 relates to, again, uses that may be permitted, and you go down the list. Impervious surface is the 5th numbered paragraph. So you are granting flexibility in the PUD with respect to each of those numbered issues. The one we're looking at now, number 4, is simply relates to density, and the problem, if you will, using that word for purposes of this discussion, the problem relates only to density. It's that paragraph 4 that contains the problematic language.
Thank you. So why wouldn't we just change the square footage amount as opposed to the other items?
Mayor and council, we talked about that. Again, I'm speaking for others who will correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked about, well, we did a little bit of history work to understand where the city's been. I mean, you've got an interim planner, an interim manager, and a new, not interim, but new city attorney, new to this city attorney. And so we did a little history digging to understand how we got to this interpretation, or this we would say misinterpretation on some past developments, and did our best to understand that, and then talked about ways to correct it, talked about ways to get the language to be as close to our understanding of your intent as we could, and that's what we came up with. Changing the word all to one is the simplest, quickest, most direct route, we believe. Are there other ways to do it? To your point, council member, yes, there are other ways to do this. So if you have other ideas, I think we can hear them. Yeah.
I guess that's just what comes to mind in looking at this right now. I guess I'm mindful in any change that we make. Flexibility is great. Flexibility is also maybe not so great. I want to make the right change and not make a decision, a reactionary decision to fix something that actually causes a worse problem. And I guess I don't, at this point, have enough information to understand which one is better. And my initial reaction is changing it to any one of the following versus all of them. Initial reaction is that doesn't sound right, but I can't explain it why.
And I appreciate that point, and I don't take issue with that point. I mean, that is a perfectly legitimate point you're making. I would, though, emphasize what Ben said, which is that by granting more discretion, changing the word all to one, requiring a developer to meet at least one of those listed requirements in order to get density flexibility, you still must approve it. That is not a right. You don't have a legal right to have whatever density you want at that point. It still must be approved in the city council's sole discretion, so there is that backstop against overreaching or pushing the density too far. Ultimately, it is your decision to make.
And then just the only other comment, this came up at the EDA meeting, but it actually was triggered by this, is going forward, request that we have our attorneys stamp all documents that they've reviewed and approved them, just to ensure that we've had the oversight needed.
Yep. Yeah, and Mayor and council member, I appreciated your point about that and understood the relation to this item, and I get your point.
Ben, Kara, we've been talking about this one issue, which seems to me to be pretty clear. It was all should have been one, but that's not the only issue as I understand it?
No.
You want
Through this entire review, I identified a number of other issues that need to be done. We do need the lighting plan. We do need the comments from the county to know that the whole county road turn lane design is not going to change and impact this development. The pond that you see down here in the lower southwestern corner of the development is currently on a private lot. They need to update all the plan sets to show that pond completely within an outlot, and they've indicated they will do that. And there were a number of issues just with the sewer plans, with the water plans, with grading, that there's just too many issues where both Kara and I, even taking the PUD issue away, would have come before you tonight, certainly not recommending final plat approval, potentially with preliminary, but certainly not final.
Yeah, I guess if it were just a language issue, I'd be, rightly or wrongly, I'd be inclined to approve the preliminary, but you said there's a whole host of other, not a whole host, you said there are a number of other issues that have to be worked. Can they be, is it your expectation that the developer is going to respond? I don't know that anybody can respond for the county, but they're going to be responsible in the time frame that you've indicated?
I believe that they certainly will be, and we, knowing that the city is very proactive in dealing with issues and wants to be helpful in getting these things through, have already begun a very aggressive schedule to get that code amendment change done. We anticipate having the information in front of your Planning Commission on September 2nd. The first reading would come before the City Council on the 9th. The Planning Commission the following week would review all of the updated plan sets to address all of the issues we've talked about tonight the following week, which I believe is the 15th. And then we hope to have the code amendment before you on September 22nd. And then later on that agenda, we would have the all 4 of these again back before you for your review and potential approval that night.
So normally there's a sequential nature to these things where you have a preliminary plat and there's a time delay.
Yep.
And then we come back with a final plat. Why were these all brought, or originally intended to be brought at once?
Did you want me to answer?
Well, I haven't been here that long. I can provide an answer, but Kara might provide a better answer for you.
The city has allowed preliminary plat and final plat to come through together on relatively small lot subdivisions. Rhapsody 3rd edition, it's 12 lots where the Public Works building was going to go at one point. So Holly had offered to the developer that they certainly could attempt to submit on that basis. But as Ben noted, and in my memo, it's noted that I would have been recommending against final plat approval because they need to have some more of those engineering ducts worked out before I'm comfortable with the plat.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Joe?
So with the whole the PUD language, we changed this. Does anything change to the city? When I go out and look at the new development that follows the actual law now, does it look any different? I mean, what?
No, you would not see any change. The change would be to the language to really make sure that the word of the code reads the way the city typically has been approving these types of developments.
And there's no special, like, I don't know, back deal that you can do something different than what's not normally done?
No, again, the one change still is under your sole discretion on what type of flexibility you as council want to approve in the future.
Okay.
And I guess Kara, you can say that we've been at least consistent in the approach, that we've read all but acted as if it was one.
Yeah, I'm not a planner, so I can only speak to.
No, but
what I've seen
you've been here.
But yeah, consistently, we're not talking about doing anything that isn't consistent with all the developments this council has approved and the council before you.
And when the change is made from all to one, assuming it is, we'll act, our behavior, or the questions that confront us will be no different than the ones in the past.
Right.
All right. Anybody else?
Just mindful of moving with a sense of urgency. Thank you for doing so.
Yeah, we guard our reputation as problem solvers. We treat that pretty carefully, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything on our side to facilitate the development. Clearly, the developer has obligations, and they have to be met, and we're not going to back down from that. But the timing, where there's flexibility, we want to be able to demonstrate cooperation.
And I can say from the date of identifying this particular issue, the timeline that we've laid out is the absolute best we can do under statutory guidelines for notifying the public of the potential change and taking it through the code process.
Okay, any other?
I just
Lonnie?
have one more just call out. We're talking about the proposed trail, increasing the width of that particular trail, and some of that's also, we're trying to find out where county is going to fall in terms of the right-of-way. I would just sort of would prefer if and when that comes back, and I know Ann's not here at the moment, but that we are aware of, is there any plan for this particular trail, funding, otherwise, in the CIP and future plans? Because this always comes up as a question every time, which is how are we going to fund it? When is it going to be built? Do we have it budgeted in all of those components?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
So the developer would be required to construct this trail, and all we're trying to do is get the pedestrians who are coming out of the neighborhood over to County Road 18 to a trail that's already there. We still have that gap on either end of County Road 18 to get everything tied together, so we'll be sending more pedestrians towards that gap. But the other thing is too, we wanted them getting to the intersection, so there's a trail on the south side of County Road 18,
yeah.
and we would want them to travel to Bavaria Road and cross at the intersection instead of running across County Road 18 to get to the trail on the south side.
So let me ask the council, do we agree with Ben and I guess Kara's recommendation? I do.
Yes.
Yep, that's fine.
Make it happen as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
Kara, you want to talk about water, or Ed?
Do you want to switch? We're going to play musical chairs. So I need to point to things. All right. Mayor and council, the next item on the agenda tonight is the approval for final design for the water storage facility. And I am going to jump down to my agenda item as quickly as I can. Alrighty, so on July 14th, the City Council authorized the team of TKDA and BAR to complete preliminary design phase services for the water storage facility. That work has been completed, and there is a report summarizing their conclusions in your agenda packet. What we're looking for is authorization to move to final design for the project. So the team is recommending that a 0.75 million gallon reservoir be constructed on the site. One of the things we had them take a look at was whether or not the existing booster station that's located in Rhapsody Park could be modified so that the pumps associated with the ground storage reservoir could be located in that building versus having to construct an additional structure in the same general location. So they did conclude that they would be able to use that existing building. They would have to make some modifications within the building, but the structure would serve this space as well. They're recommending that 12 feet of the south wall of the ground storage reservoir be exposed, and there were some sketches in your packet that shows what that would look like. So based on the grades on the property, the bulk of the storage facility would be covered, but by exposing the wall adjacent to the ball field, there's some cost savings associated with that versus having to bring in more fill to fill up around the building and potentially grade back into the park. So Ann and I both felt that that would be appropriate and would be an acceptable view from within the park. The homes across the street aren't really going to be seeing the side of the storage facility because it's down below where they are. The team was recommending that a portion of the cover over the water storage facility be constructed in such a fashion that a public use could occur on top of it, so that we're making use of that space versus just covering it, putting a fence around it and not having it serve any other purpose. Ann did take that issue to the Park and Rec Committee last week, and they had some discussions about what they would possibly recommend happening in that space. It sounds like there was talk about a need for a sledding hill somewhere, so I haven't had an opportunity to discuss with the design team if there would be a way to turn that slope into an opportunity for a sledding hill. But generally there was talk of, something a little more less intense, like a overlook and some park benches and some places to sit where you could see the ball games going on, but not necessarily anything more intense. I certainly don't want to speak for Ann, but since she's on vacation, some of the more intensive uses that they discussed, there's concern that the park wasn't really planned for a destination type added amenity, and so there wouldn't be adequate parking to suddenly start drawing community-wide into what is really a neighborhood park. But the conclusion was that there should be some public use of that space. So Ann was continuing to vet through that. The total estimated cost for the construction, reusing the existing booster station, adding a emergency generator at the site, including a construction contingency of 20% because the designers are concerned about what they're seeing generally in construction costs with bids going up. We ended up at about an estimated cost of $3 million. That is for the 0.75 million gallon reservoir. As noted in the report, if we wanted to reduce the size to a 500,000 gallon reservoir, we could save about $270,000 roughly in total project costs. What I want to do now is turn to some little bit more technical information related to deciding what size of a storage facility to construct. So I'm going to walk you through the trigger charts that we take a look at for trying to decide at what point in time we need to construct a new facility and at how large of a facility to construct. So this is based on a model that we've put together that has all of our historical use, how big of a population we serve today, and then takes a look at projections for both growth and projected water use by the users on our system. So from a financial perspective, the City Council's been using different numbers for estimated new homes per year, but we really needed to take a look at it from a different perspective. So what would be conservative from a financial perspective would maybe result in us undersizing the water storage facility needs in the future. So trying to figure out how many new homes we were adding to the system for the future was of considerable discussion. But for the purposes of this demonstration, we've assumed 150 new homes a year, which is more. I think, if I recall correctly, you're at 90 in your financial model moving forward. So there is more homes projected, which means increased water use. So the bar is going up over time due to added population. So if you look at the three lines on the chart though, this little dashed line represents how much storage the city would need to have on their system in gallons per day if you were meeting the DNR guidelines for water use. So if we were down at that 75 gallons per capita per day that we talked about in our workshop on water use. So if we were down here, we today have about 1.1 million gallons of storage. So if I were to follow that line along, we wouldn't start to need additional storage until the population approached closer to 11,000. That would be the point at which time we would need that additional storage. In reality, in 2012, which was our highest year that we talked about, our water use was up at this red line, that's if we were getting 140 gallons per capita per day, this red line represents how much water we would need to have in storage to serve our population and meet fire flow requirements. I don't think it makes sense to plan for the red line because, as we've talked about, we need to implement the efforts we've discussed to get our water use down. The blue line represents what we've really set as our target goal for water use. I think we'd have a really hard time getting all the way down to the DNR number, like we talked about before, because we have a lot of new homes, a lot of new sod, larger lawns. So we've set a target of 100. So when I look at my recommendation for sizing of the storage and at what point we need it, I'm basing it off this 100 gallons per capita per day. So I'm not even really dealing with the fact that we're using more water even than the 100. In 2013, the number was 116 gallons per capita per day. And as Kelly noted, it looks like we're actually using more this year even though it was wetter. We'll have to adjust that for population to see what that works out to gallons per capita per day. So if we were to just go ahead with the 500,000 gallon storage facility here in 2015, when our population served is at this point, that jumps our water storage amount up to here. So we would have 1.6 million gallons of storage. Based on a projection of 150 new homes per year, we would need to add more storage in 2024, assuming that's when our population served hits 12,000. So what I don't like about the 500,000 though is that if we really continue to be operating somewhere between this 110 and 140, it really doesn't take us that long we would have to pretty quickly get our water use down to the 110 in order to really wait all the way till the population hits 12,000 to add additional storage. And I just don't think it's realistic for us to relearn our water use throughout the community in a 3-4 year window. I think it's going to take time to see that change get implemented. And when you're talking about only a $270,000 savings in cost on a $3 million project, and that cost savings doesn't even take into account the land. We've already acquired the land. We didn't have to pay for the land in this case. The developer donated it. But that factors into that overall cost. So the second trigger chart I gave you has the exact same information, but it just shows if we add the 0.75 million gallons now, we have basically till the population hits 14,000 people. Hopefully over that long period of time we've successfully reduced our water use and we don't need another additional storage until 2029. Provided that it takes us that long to add that many people. Who knows? We might add more homes by then. I don't know. So certainly I would be happy to answer any detailed questions related to this information. I am recommending that we authorize the team to proceed with final design. They're pretty adamant that we want to be taking, because of their concerns with the bidding market, they would like to see us actually receiving bids yet this year. So they said that with the tank contractors, it's advantageous to have your bids received and awarded before year end so they can plan their schedules for the next year. It is anticipated that it'll take an entire construction season to construct these improvements, so that's also playing into it. So getting those bids early and getting the contractor kicked off at the beginning of the year versus waiting. Aside from that, in terms of the financing, I would maybe just ask our finance manager to comment on how we pay for a $3 million water storage facility.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. We had originally envisioned a $2 million water storage project, so that's kind of been what we've been working with. When I plug in the $3 million in our water fund, it is possible from a cash flow standpoint to do that without bonding. However, what that means is that we're probably going to need to bond for well number 5, which we're planning right now for about 2016. So. And then we have another well that would be coming online possibly 2019, and I think we'd be able to pay for that one with cash, assuming growth continues as it has been. So,
in your long-range plan, financial plan, did you include the well in 2016?
Yes.
The
Yep.
bonding of that?
Yep. And now with the storage going up $1 million, that means we're looking at bonding for at least part of that project.
Bearer of good news?
I guess I kind of, well, number one, thank you, you've done a great job. I'm concerned, I can relate this back to the Public Works facility. We need 23,000 square feet, and we found a way to get away with 16, right? Yeah, I get it, the 750 is less cost, but we also have to look at it from a resources standpoint, and how does this play into other things. I guess my concern is at this point, overall, that we started a couple months ago with, let's go ahead with a plan just to see what it's going to cost, and now it's go spend $3 million. I don't know if I'm ready to spend $3 million.
Yeah, there's a sense, I have the sense that we're stepping up into the, at McDonald's, and now, and we're, give me one, and it's like we're giving up. Let me ask you a question first. The DNR target of 75 gallons per capita, I think it is that realistic?
I think we would have a really hard time as a community meeting that. We need to demonstrate to them that we're moving towards that number versus further away from that number.
And therefore, the model you're showing is at 100?
Yeah.
Are we giving up too easily? I mean, we had more rain this June, and we used more water than the prior year. We're not disciplined at all in our water usage, are we?
It
By any
appears
stretch?
not.
But you, if I can, you did mention that you still need to look at that also for the number of new homes in comparison.
Correct. If we
So-
weren't growing, if we were done, and I wasn't being asked to recommend approval of a plat after plat after plat, I wouldn't be recommending that we build new storage. I'd be recommending that we aggressively try to get the use down. But to the extent that we're continuing to grow, we're getting, without that water use going down, we're getting to the point where I'm not going to be comfortable recommending approval of plats because we don't have adequate public facilities to serve those new houses with fire protection.
Is there a potential alternative? So I'm going back to our workshop on this. And one of the problems that was described was the ability to replenish the water tank and the time it takes to do that. Is there a less expensive solution to replenish the existing tank we have more rapidly?
Pump it quicker?
You could prioritize the well over the storage facility, but you're still not going to keep up with the demand that's coming out of the storage
But
tank.
does it give us more room to breathe, so to speak? Does it help us?
You're going to have to build this facility, so if you don't build it now or you build it in 3 years, it's just going to cost you more. So your best option would be to build a smaller facility with lower capital costs, and you'll have additional capital costs in a future year, or reduce growth.
Well, and so I understand that, and, you know, think of in terms of logistics and economic order quantities and all that stuff, but in the end, it still comes down to you gotta pay some money now, or you gotta pay some money later, and I recognize that it might cost more if we do this later. We can do it now, or we can do it in 3 years. All right, we just spent $6 million on 2 facilities. I'm not ready to spend $3 million more.
Can I ask a question of Kelly? I know that Kara's looking at this with the 150 new homes a year. Your projection is based on what?
90 new homes a year.
The 90 new homes a year. So if we see the growth above and beyond that, that will impact the financial amount of money coming in based on water collection and all of that?
That's correct, because we'd have a water availability charge and a water core charge with each home, along with the additional water use from the utility. The other thing I would add is that with our water fund, it does cash flow very well, and we are building reserves. So even if we do have to bond for this project, I don't foresee that we'd have to raise water rates for that.
And I suppose back to one of the original questions we had, a tank, elevated tank doesn't save us any money.
No, they were cost neutral between the two options, purely just looking at the core construction items was our initial analysis between the two, so a booster station and a storage
And
facility.
the argument for doing this, spending the $3 million next year, is that if we delay it a year, the cost would be prohibitively higher.
I expect the costs will continue to go up. If the council were to say tonight we're not building a water tower, I would be going back, figuring out how many plats we've approved, how many new homes that is, and figuring out whether I'm starting to recommend against future plats. And I'm not saying that to be dramatic about it. Operationally, the Public Works Department is very uncomfortable with every new plat that comes through because this storage facility is not coming on board. So we've delayed it as long as we were comfortable delaying it, and we think now is the right time to do it. The only thing that I think's open for debate is whether you do the $500,000 or the 0.75.
And the .5 we can pay for based on our current projections.
It saves about $270,000, but you're essentially still in the same boat with the next well from a financial perspective, because it's not like it's $1 million less, it's only $270,000 less.
Could you put the other graph up again, Kara, please?
So, right now, the $3 million includes one well, or does not include a well?
No, that's for storage. So, we have this problem with all of our large capital improvement budget items. Until we authorize doing studies, we don't really have good numbers. So we have this $2 million that we didn't pull out of thin air, but we did some preliminary research and plugged a number in. But until we did the preliminary design report, we don't really know the numbers. So $3 million's the number to build the facility that we're recommending get constructed.
But we also need a well with it.
Correct.
So it's actually...
We don't need a well today. We're looking at a well for 2016.
Okay, so pretty much at the same time.
Yeah.
And the cost of a well is?
What number did we plug in, Kelly? Do you remember?
I think the number you gave me was $1,380,000.
And that, again, is just some preliminary numbers we've gotten from our water system people. So until we find a site and figure out what depth we have to drill a well to and where we find water, we won't know what that number is.
So we're looking at a $4 million cost.
$4.5 million.
Yeah, and water infrastructure improvements.
How is our present capacity, what you projected here, compared to Chanhassen, Chaska, Waconia?
I don't have any information about how much storage they have for their population.
I'm thinking more storage as well as usage. I mean, where are they at capacity?
I think we touched on what their usage, what their gallons per capita per day was at the last workshop. And some had like lower average day uses and higher peaks, but I don't think we were all... Interestingly enough, Chanhassen is struggling with the same issue. They had the same topic on their agenda, the same council meeting that we were talking about it.
But are they approaching, so what I hear from you is that Chanhassen may be approaching what I'll call our capacity, whatever they have right now, they're approaching their capacity. The other ones might not be. I guess what I'm trying to understand is that if we can produce 100 gallons a day, are we at 98, 75, whatever we're at, and how does that compare to the other cities?
In terms of what we produce?
What's possible at 100% production versus where we're at? What percentage are we as... We're not at 100% capacity of our capacity today in terms of we're pumping out as much as
we are if we're at 140. So in 2012...
But we're not at 140.
We were at 140 in 2012. It every year fluctuates based on growth and rain conditions. 2012 was a dry year, so that's why the water use was so high. 2013, it bounced back down to 116. So I have a 10 years worth of historical data as to where we've been. We've always been on the high side.
And so where are the other cities with respect to that capacity?
Their water use, their gallons per capita per day they were in the same general high side of use as well.
I remember that's correct from the workshop that we did.
Yep.
But they're very similar.
Yep.
And then in terms of their usage, how does that compare to their ability to produce water?
I don't know how much storage I don't know where they are on their trigger chart.
But Chanhassen had to react very quickly to an issue they had in build, correct?
Yeah, what they had was, so they have sand and gravel wells, which is also what we have, and they ended up having their well, one well or two wells or some number of wells go dry. So they had to have the entire city stop using water, and they had to, somewhat on an emergency, go find additional water supply. So they're working on a well siting study to figure out where they're going to locate their next well field and get some additional wells and storage online.
So what I'm trying to understand, Kara, and we touched on it a little bit at the workshop, you mentioned there have been situations where the cities have transferred water back and forth. Not a common practice, but there are connections between the different cities, and someone short of capacity and we open a valve and sell them water. And so if we look at these charts, what happens if we actually exceed the red line? And again, this is trying to balance a whole bunch of things here. How long can we wait? And if we exceed the red line, is there ability to transfer water from another entity that has existing capacity, assuming they have capacity? What are the options, I guess?
So the only interconnection you have is with the city of Shorewood, and their water is not treated in the same fashion as your water is treated. So the first practical problem becomes you're starting to mix water that isn't as good of quality as your water is. I don't have any information as to where Shorewood is with their water storage. The interconnect has been used twice in the however many years I've worked here. Once during the Smithtown Road culvert project where Met Council had closed the road for a year. The people north of the culvert were getting water from Shorewood. We got a lot of complaints from the people north of the culvert because the water quality wasn't as good as our water quality. And then when they were cleaning their tower, we gave them water so that they would have additional water supply while their tower was out.
So in a very nice way, you said you've already been there, done that, figured it out.
What I don't know though is whether or not they would even have the capacity to serve, but typically mixing untreated with treated water doesn't go over well with your customers.
You know, Kara, assuming that we're not going to change behavior anytime soon, but that we accept that beginning really soon, we embark on a more rigorous approach to maybe prevent the next $3 million expenditure. Isn't the real problem that with the existing capacity between, what, midnight and 4 a.m. or midnight and 7 a.m., we use so much water on our lawns during the summer that we run the risk of not being able to put out a fire?
Correct. So if you had a fire hit at about the same time, there wouldn't be adequate supply in our storage facilities to keep up with the fire trucks to fight the fire because it's pulled down so far with everybody watering their lawns.
So if we accept that as a reality and that's not a good condition, we have no choice but to build additional capacity. And then the question is three-quarters of a million or $1 million. I'm almost of the opinion of it pains me to be supportive of something in the range of $3 million, but if we could, if we agreed that that's the right approach, and we embark on a rigorous discipline education campaign to prevent the next $3 million or forestall the next $3 million expenditure, I guess we don't have much choice in not supporting this.
I would agree with that, though I do think it is important to note that we're growing. And so with water infrastructure, it is always, and sewer infrastructure, you always have to build it before you need it. You can't really wait till there's 50 houses to have enough water supply to fight the fire. You've got to...
It's like the Wasserman Trunk line.
Correct. We had to make that investment in the Trunk Utility Extension Project in order to accommodate that growth. We need to make that commitment with wells. Prior to this current, the last 2 years, 2 rounds of city councils, the prior city councils had to deal with 2 big major lift stations that had to be constructed to accommodate future growth. One to serve the Lake Bridge neighborhood, but that lift station was constructed to serve all the way out to the end of our early annexation agreement, even though those users aren't going to be here for a while, because you can't really build it as you go. It's not cost effective from an infrastructure perspective. You have to build it to accommodate the growth before it gets there. And then obviously the water treatment plant, there was a big decision that had to be made when that was put online of how big to build it to serve how big of a population. So what you would be doing is, if you got your water use down, you're pushing out the timing of when you need the next storage facility. But if you're still growing, you're going to need enough storage to serve those homes. You're going to need another water treatment plant at some point to serve those additional lots. So it is important to then take a look at your rate structure and your core fees and your water availability charges to make sure that you are collecting from the users who need this added infrastructure to pay for it, so that the existing people aren't paying for it.
Kara, most of the growth is coming south, southwest. say, all right, the decision for us is it 500,000 or is it 750,000? Does it matter where those 250,000 are, given the growth is further south?
No, so we've been planning for storage in this area and planning for the next round of storage in the south area. So it becomes very important from a planning perspective to know where the infrastructure is going to go, so we build the right size pipes along the way. So that piece of your comprehensive plan is a very used element of the comprehensive plan that it becomes pretty important. But whether 500,000 is here and 250,000 is down there isn't a significant difference in what that infrastructure would need to be constructed like.
Could we get away with a 500,000 gallon tank now and 750 later, further south?
Yeah, it would. Your system is set up that wouldn't make a difference on the infrastructure we're building to connect to it.
I got couple comments and a question. So Kara, the water tower, it's really costs the same as a storage facility.
Yeah, so at the preliminary, not preliminary, prior to, when we were working with the developer, we obtained estimates from constructors of tanks and of towers and compared the two. And I've heard this from other professionals. So one of the people working on our team is Vern Jacobson. He's done work for the city for a lot of years, but he was the head of the St. Paul Regional Water Service for ever and ever and ever, and then retired. Still works full-time designing water systems. But typically the two are cost neutral between the two. Then you look at the operational costs, and so with a ground storage facility you have pumping costs, with an elevated tank you have painting costs. So generally the costs start to balance out between the two. I've found that it tends to be preference between public works departments of whether they would have an elevated tank or storage. In the case of this circumstance, the neighbors were opposed to elevated, the developer was opposed to elevated. Apparently it's challenging to sell lots in new developments with elevated tanks, so since the costs were neutral and being able to acquire the land at no cost compared to purchasing the land has a value too.
Okay, so you're confident in that. If you went and got a price for a water tower, you're just wasting your time. It's not worth doing that.
Well, I would have a hard time recommending approval of it.
Right.
For that site.
For that site, but if we had
Any site anywhere else that we could build it, what I would expect is that the costs are similar.
Okay. Well, I guess for me, I'm definitely not comfortable with spending any money or giving the go-ahead, you know, with a big bump, and it's $3 million or $4.5 million, and I don't want to spend any money until we're going to address our rate structure and our use, and I think it should be a comprehensive package that we're going to build this thing, but we're going to make some changes to how we pay for it. And I think the reason why we can go so fast on this is because it's not a levy, it's a pay-as-you-go. So the money's there, and that's why we're slamming through it.
Kara, as we build further south, what triggers the next construction for sewer?
It's being constructed with development, so
I'm sorry, I didn't phrase that correctly. So we're coming around the south side of Wasserman right now, and that will connect back up into
Lake Town.
All right, so now when we cross Wasserman, I remember there was a trunk going down. What triggers the...
So essentially, assuming there isn't something I don't know about any of the land down there, the trunk infrastructure should continue to get constructed as part of development with us just paying the oversized costs. The Wasserman project was unique because we had this sort of no man's land to get the pipe through, to get down and around the lake. We don't have another scenario similar to that I'm aware of in looking at that future alignment. You'll have another lift station that needs to be constructed at some point down that direction. I can't quite remember off the top of my head how far south we could get before we need to build another one. But we'll be looking to phase the development then south of Long County Road 11. And then the pipe swings back up to the previous land that the city owned down on 43 and 10. So it's like a
And a subsequent tank would be needed for that area.
Yeah.
From a water standpoint.
Yeah, and really that is just a function of the increased users, so.
Ouch. I mean, it pains me to support, well, 2 million. No, it's not 2 million, it's 3 million. And now maybe it's 3 million and another million on top of that. On the other hand, during the summer, I'd hate to have my house on fire and have the fire department not be able to generate enough water pressure to put it out. We also want to continue an aggressive growth profile and support that aggressive profile, and we'd hate to have a plat come before you and they say, well, I can't approve it because there's no water potential available. But I do agree with Joe that we need to come up with a more disciplined approach to the demand side. It's just, I mean, 75 gallons per person per day is maybe unrealistic. What is realistic? And what are we going to do about people who water their lawn in violation of the odd even days and who just run up bills of what we had one that was a quarter was $1,200. I mean, this is triple the rates. I'm not suggesting that, but the nice part about this, while it's a lot of money, the 3 million, if we're as successful as we were when we invested $1.7 million in the Wasserman trunk line, they'll come. I mean, we're still a desirable community, and as long as we provide the adequate services, I'm confident we're still going to continue to grow. So I guess, having said all that, while I said the word ouch, I think I'd support the 7 going forward with your recommendation. And it pains me to say that.
But again, back to Joe's comment. During our workshop, we talked about approaches to modifying behavior and usage. I don't like progressive rate structures, increasing rates, things like that. Politically, I just don't believe in that.
Well, it hasn't been effective either.
Well, it's not working, man.
But
That's probably the most important one.
I would support, though, if we set a threshold like 75 gallons a day a person. If you are under 75 gallons, we cut your water bill in half. Make it financially, just cut it.
Well, that's kind of where I was going to.
You know, instead
we
of-
talked about an education program, and the first step in that education program is you know who the high water users are. How would you like to save $300 a quarter? Can we affect it that way first? If we can, then that should become a standard practice going forward.
Well, our track record at raising rates to forestall demand hasn't worked.
So is that something we can look at, Ed?
You can certainly look into that.
An education program, I don't even like that term either. It's just
Behavior modification or...
come up and say, would you like to save $300 and
But it's clear we got to address the demand side. And I'm supporting your recommendation as long as we marry it up with an aggressive and pick a better term, education, behavior modification, change of behavior approach somehow. How about the rest of you?
Can I just get a clarification once again on total costs for the 75 million? Because I've heard 2, 3, 4. I just, what is our final cost?
The estimated cost in the preliminary design report, then adding contingency and engineering costs for the 0.75 million gallon reservoir is 3 million.
Okay,
If we did 0.5, we would save 270,000.
that's all. Okay.
And that works without a new well, or we do have to have a new well?
You need the new well anyway?
You're going to need a new well regardless. So storage deals with storage, well deals with supply. I have a whole nother round of trigger charts on the supply side. But I do think it becomes very important to both tackle whatever we're calling it from an education component, but also from a finance perspective. If the council were to authorize final design, we aren't going to be bidding till October. You're in the middle of looking at the utility budgets for 2015 and 2016. We have to continue to get the best numbers possible that we can to you guys so you can do analysis and figure out whether the core fees need to go up, for example, or, you know, to your point, figure out how to cover those things.
So one more question on the finances. So it's 3 million to do the new storage tank at 75, right?
Yep.
Kelly, how much do we currently have to pay for that?
Over 3 million.
I'm projecting right now that at the end of 2014, we'll have about $3.5 million in our water fund. So if we had to spend $3 million in 2015 on storage, we could do that.
Okay.
And it's still cash flow. The problem comes in 2016 when we need a well.
And that will also be dependent upon number of homes and continued growth, because you're looking at that at a 90 new homes a year. And so again, I know it's conservative, but I just wanted to make sure I understood. Right now, as we look at it, that's based on the 90, correct?
That's correct. If we were doing 150 new homes a year and we had availability charges coming in from final plats, it's possible we could not need to bond.
Okay.
But
All right, and that's just because I want to make sure I understand where we are with all of that. I still agree we would need to do both looking at rates as we are now, and then the full, I'll call it education for now, for lack of a better word, process to get through that.
Community engagement.
I don't think there's any good word for it. What is the last, I'll call it, emergency expenditure of any size we've had to do with water treatment plant, water infrastructure? And how big was that?
I don't believe we've constructed any major water infrastructure since the water treatment plant and associated projects. So with that plant, we did a water plant, a 600,000 gallon ground storage reservoir, a new well, and a well rehab, and put a whole bunch of trunk lines in, and remodeled the fire station.
But since then, has there been any issue where, oh my gosh, something broke and we've got to go spend $500,000 or something?
No, we've had budgeted maintenance type things. The Public Works Department certainly maintains those facilities and improves them as they need to be replaced or repaired, but I don't think, probably the most significant expense just comes from the oversized costs. So when the trunk lines go into the development, we pay the oversized cost for the larger trunk line compared to a standard lateral water service, but those all come in with plats.
What could happen that could cause a very large expenditure unforeseen?
If we were to run out of water in our existing well field, like happened to Chanhassen, that's probably the biggest unforeseen risk.
Is there an equipment issue that could come up that could cause something like that?
That's a better question for Public Works, but none of the equipment is that old.
Concern getting cash down to such low levels.
Right.
Can I ask a question? What % of the water that we use during the year is for irrigation? Is there a...
I wonder if I have that number, but I can't think of what it is off the
You'd get a
top
good
of my head.
representation if you just look at June, July, and August.
So our average day to peak day ratio, so our average day use is 365 days a year without that added peak. And the peak day ratio comes in the summer, so that ratio in 2013 was 3.8 times more water in the summer, essentially, per day than in the winter. In the year before, it was 4.2 times. The DNR wants us to hit a 2.6 is their target.
So really, the infrastructure that we're paying for is to have green lawns. And, I mean, I'm the first one. I love a heavily fertilized, well-watered lawn. I think it's what we should have. So, but, I mean, something like that'd be a good stat to have that, again, we're spending millions of dollars to water our lawns.
Well, and you're paying to treat that water too.
Right.
That's why I'm still trying to figure out how we can come up with a capture reuse system that works on an individual homeowner basis. Because here we've got all this water sitting in the 85 stormwater ponds we have all around us. Yet we're pulling water out of the ground, treating it, delivering it to dump it back on the lawn and send it to the pond and off to the lake.
Well, it sounds like the one thing at least that we're all in agreement on is that something has to happen on the demand side. Either incent or decent, that's not a word. The usage. But I come back to the,
Is there more value in having $200,000+ in the bank versus an extra 250,000 gallons in storage?
At the bank, we're getting, what, 0.02%?
But it's cash. What would our finance committee say?
Well, one of them just spoke and said,
Well, I mean, I guess I'm thinking back to, I haven't been on the finance committee for a while, but I'm thinking back to Greg and Tom and some of the conversations we had with them. There's probably an analysis to be done there.
so I hear a
It might be, well, I'm
question on the table. Now we got to give Kara direction,
No,
yes, no, or sideways.
Is it 500,000 or is it 750,000? I was more concerned about, is it a binary, yes or no, and I don't think it's a binary discussion.
Bonnie?
Kara, where are you on timing? I know you said that we want to get bids out and receive them before the end of the year so we can get the costs in. Is there capability to take a step back, do the financial component?
There isn't a whole lot of room in the timeline because there's a lot of work that has to go into the design. We have to obtain soil borings, and then the designers need to prepare a bid package. It's possible that we could turn them loose on final design and then come back soon with a size answer if we want a little more time to contemplate the 0.5 versus the 0.75. That'll make them nervous, but I think that if they could get working on the other components that go into the final design.
That we would need anyways.
Correct, that is size neutral. They can start working on the booster station modifications that need to happen from a design perspective. They certainly were hoping for an answer tonight, but if we didn't authorize final design in any sort, then I think we start to push the bid date.
Sure.
And
we want to get it for the best possible cost we can.
We do. They had me put a 20% contingency in those numbers because of the bid numbers.
Because of the way it
that's
is.
$500,000 in contingency sitting there in that $3 million number.
I am inclined to recommend that we go ahead and move forward and we build the 75 million gallon facility. At the same time, we put into place an aggressive education, utility look at utilities, look at education, which to include an incentive or decentive, whatever word we'd like to use there, in terms of usage. And I'd also would like to know what it would cost us or what would be the next steps in looking at the pond water capability component that you mentioned, Kara, as well. I would rather see us set up for appropriate needs, and if we continue growing at the rate we're growing, I'd be concerned at the $500,000 that the $270,000 in the bank will not do us a lot of good if we are behind when that growth comes.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to see this go back to the Finance Committee. This is just too much money to be spending, and I just don't think it's proper to not go through the Finance Committee with specific details and specific numbers.
Then at minimum, I would say, let Kara go ahead and hold on the either $500,000, whether we do the 50 or the 75, but have that movement go forward so we don't lose the timing and the potential for getting the right amount, the least amount possible in the course of time.
Jim?
I want to go have dinner. No, I would like to have the Finance Committee take another look at it. I think that there is value in that. Continuing the process, I would support that.
By my count, that's 2 in favor of going forward and 2 in favor of taking it back to the Finance Committee. I think
I can support going to the Finance Committee, but I think we need to keep the project moving forward. To Kara's answer to my earlier question, which is keep the momentum. Don't decide on 50 or 75, because no matter what, we have to build something. So keep them moving forward so they can continue the project and we don't lose time on the bidding capability.
For the record, I was agreeing with both.
Kara, are you clear?
Or I could just say I abstain.
There's precedent for that, and it's not very good. Not at this level, of course. Are you?
I think I need to be officially authorized to continue with final design.
What's the expenditure for final design? How much do you need?
I can look that up if you give me a minute.
Okay.
I don't recall the number off the top of my...
Mr. Mayor, when would we talk about our rate structure? And I'm thinking more of trying to reward the people that...
I'm sorry, they win?
Yeah.
September Finance Committee meeting is the first time we see it?
Yes.
And that's the 8th or the 9th?
17th.
17th. 17th of September.
So that's when we would have a healthy debate on rates and...
That's the first time we'd see
Yeah.
The Finance Committee would see it.
Yeah, the Finance Committee would see it, and we might want to invite someone from a technical perspective to talk
Yeah.
about the technical aspects of it.
Sure.
I opened the wrong folder. You can keep talking and I'll keep looking.
Do we need that number?
Okay, yeah, while Kara's looking that up, are we in agreement it's going back to the Finance Committee?
Oh,
And in the meantime, you're going to go forward with the minimal design to keep the momentum of the project going forward. And in the meantime, you're looking up the number for what that number would be.
I was going to suggest that, the motion I was going to suggest was that we authorize the expenditure of whatever that final amount is. That's the next checkpoint. And in parallel, we do the
I think that's what, Lonnie, you were hoping to...
I was fine without the number. I was more worried about let's keep the steps moving forward, but number's fine. Because we'll end up paying regardless.
That part anyway.
The final design fee was estimated at about $85,000.
So another $85,000.
Yeah, and that's included within your $3 million number, but yeah, that would be the next phase. As a matter of just fact, the project does come back to the city council for approval prior to bidding, and then would come back for approval prior to award.
So do you want to make the motion, or you're authorized?
Motion, we authorize TKDA
Bar Engineering.
Yeah, to spend up to $90,000, not to exceed $90,000 for final design, taking us to the next checkpoint.
Next check, and in all of that, you're to not make a final determination as to the size, the ultimate size.
Yeah, we can bring that
You
back
stop
then.
short of that.
I can find out when they drop dead need that date, and then I'll work with the finance department and the city manager to keep that on schedule, but get it back here.
And how's your
Okay.
schedule look like for September 18th, 17th?
What day of the week is that?
Wednesday.
Looks great.
Finance Committee.
I'm not allowed to take vacation the rest of construction season, I've been told, so. I'll be here.
Enough on this?
Yes.
Floyd's Bar.
Mr. Mayor,
Liquor
that
license
was a,
amendment.
Wait, we need to-
was that a motion?
I'm sorry?
I think
That
it
was
was
a
a
motion.
motion.
Oh, it was a motion.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Proceed up to $90,000. Now, the liquor license for Floyd's.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Floyd's Bar has requested an amendment to their on-sale liquor license to extend the licensed premises for an event on September 26th and 27th to include a 40 by 82 tent attached to their fence located in their parking lot behind their patio. Floyd's licensed premises includes their bar, mezzanine, and deck and patio. And since the City of Victoria is the licensing authority for on-sale licenses, all options for approval and denial have been reviewed and are listed in your packet as follows. An extension to the licensed area must be compact and contiguous. It is the interpretation of the Minnesota Department of Public Safety Alcohol Enforcement Division that this may include decks and patios for on-sale establishments. However, a tented-off area of the licensed establishment is not considered by the state to be compact and contiguous, and it's cited under Section 340A.410 Subdivision 7 of Minnesota statutes. Certain types of licenses are eligible to obtain a temporary liquor license to allow for on-sale outside of their licensed premises. Floyd's Bar does not meet the statutory requirements to obtain an on-sale temporary liquor license outside of their licensed premises, and that's cited in Section 340A.401 Subdivision 10. The Victoria Code of Ordinances also has criteria in which on-sale licenses are limited to certain areas. An extension of Floyd's licensed premise to include a tent would only meet the requirements of the code if the City Council were to conclude that a tent is not an outdoor area, and that's under Section 4.50 of the City Code. Since the city is the licensing authority, the city has three options. Number one, amend the code to allow for temporary extensions of licensed premises as proposed upon the approval of the council and subject to conditions such as a required application fee and insurance addendum and/or additional coverage, including options for approval and denial. Approving the request upon completion of such amendments. Number two, the City Council may deem the addition of the tent to be considered compact and contiguous and not an outdoor area, and could approve the requested temporary extension of the licensed premises. The third option would be to deny the request based upon Minnesota statutes and the current City Code. Staff is recommending option one, which is an amendment to the code which would provide the options to approve the temporary extension request and establish terms and conditions for such requests. Due to the timing of this request, an ordinance amendment cannot be completed in time for Floyd's request. Therefore, it is further recommended that the temporary license extension be approved, subject to the city receiving an addendum to Floyd's liquor liability insurance to include the extended area and provide temporary fencing and security plans so patrons are not allowed to leave the extended area with alcoholic beverages. And in your packet in front of you tonight is that addendum for your consideration. So that is the staff recommendation to approve option number one, which would allow this to occur.
Is that acceptable to Floyd's?
Lois, do you want to comment on the recommendation?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's our 17th anniversary this year, and so we've neglected our anniversary for a number of years. I can say that if you allow us to do the tent, the insurance company has given us approval, and There's fencing that is connecting, that is going to be surrounding the three sides. One side abuts our wall, which opens into the wide gates that go into the patio. The only access is through the building, through the patio, and into the tent, and we would have additional security outside by the tent, making sure no one comes in, especially minors.
Do I hear you agreeing then with the recommendation of the interim city manager?
Well, I couldn't quite hear everything with the air conditioning running, so if you would repeat that.
Okay, it would be that an amendment to the code would provide options to approve a temporary extension and establish terms and conditions for the request. So basically, we were allowing the temporary license for you to have the event with your appropriate insurance, which we have.
Correct.
And then we changed the code.
To accommodate it more easily in the future.
And we can allow both food and alcoholic beverages in the tent.
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
That's correct.
That's
Thank you.
acceptable?
With a permit, is that my understanding?
Yes.
Okay.
You work with Jenny Kretsch on getting that
Okay.
done.
Do we know what the cost of the permit is?
That I do not know.
Like $75 or $2,075?
I don't think it's too.
New
I don't think
water
it's the
storage
latter.
facility.
I think it's like around maybe the lesser amount.
It's a reasonable fee.
Joseph, we need to pay for a water facility.
I know. I think it'd be easier to go promote more growth. Thank you. Yes, I agree.
Sure, thanks.
Would somebody like to make a motion to accept the motion that Ed recited?
I move we approve agenda statement number 14 dash... Nope, that's not it.
151.
14-151, as recommended by our interim city manager.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Have fun on the 17th, your 17th anniversary. Cray North?
Ben, you have that one?
Absolutely. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, before you tonight is the Cray North sketch plat. So this is the first opportunity you've had to take a look at this particular development. The land in question is located to the south of Highway 5. It's in the western portion of the community, just to the south and east of Carl Cray Lake, to the west of the Watermark development, which has been built out, and then to the north of the Ambergate development that's been approved but really has yet to be built on. This is really step 2. They have had the neighborhood meeting. We conducted it on the 5th of this month. We did not have anybody in attendance, which really isn't a surprise given that there is nobody in Ambergate yet. They went through the Planning Commission, and now it's here before you. Past this, they will go to preliminary plat and then final plat. In general, the property is currently zoned agricultural, so they will need a rezoning to residential. The density that's being proposed meets your comp plan requirements. And in looking at your public facilities, you do have adequate fire protection, police protection, school, siren coverage, things like that. And the applicant is proposing a total of 13 lots. For streets, this particular development plans to gain access from Ambergate to the south. You will notice that there are 2 private drives proposed, and that's really a function of the kind of awkward nature of the buildable land on this particular parcel. So once you get to the north end of their cul-de-sac, there would be a private drive serving lots 6, 7, and 8. And then off to the side, a private drive serving 9, 10, and 11. And your code does allow for up to 3 lots off of private drives. There is really no need to extend the road beyond here, simply because the land is surrounded by wetlands and there's nothing else developable. Speaking of wetlands, they do need to be delineated by the developer and ultimately approved by the MCWD. The concept plan that's already before you does show that that wetland and the buffers would be deeded to the city in an outlot, and you can see that both ponds are also located within this proposed outlot area. Also looking at stormwater, the plans for that would also need to go through the watershed district. We've already shown you that the ponds are in the outlots, and the one real big issue that came up at the Planning Commission meeting is to have engineering ultimately really take a look at this pond and look at how access works to get up there for future maintenance and just taking care of it. Parks and Trails, we do have an existing park in the Rhapsody neighborhood very near here, so the current recommendation is going to be cash in lieu of land here. Although there is a planned future regional trail extension that would run through this property. As I understand it, it would run somewhat from this corner where we have an existing boardwalk here and follow up north through this property against Carl Cray Lake to another location to the north. Really at this time, staff would not be recommending constructing this trail. The outlot itself is going to provide the room for the regional agency who would build it an opportunity to make this connection. So what we would be looking at in preliminary plat is just, do we have enough room in this outlot between the wetland, the buffer, and the lots to actually facilitate that connection from this point all the way up to some point up north here where another boardwalk would then continue. Really, that's all I had for you here tonight. Should the applicant choose to move forward, they would go to preliminary plat. They would need the rezone and the CUP as well. This would require another public hearing in front of the Planning Commission before a council decision would be needed, and then they would have to go through final plat to really wrap up all of the final details.
Is there any reason that, from the Planning Commission's perspective, that we shouldn't approve this?
No, the Planning Commission was in full support to this. The one thing I will note is this is another PUD, but because of the timing of this application, the issue we talked about earlier with Arbor Woods really doesn't come into play, provided the amendment we talked about gets approved next month. Other than that, the Planning Commission really supported this. They felt that it was a good use of this land and an extension of that Amber Gate neighborhood.
Any other comments, questions? Somebody want to make a motion? Excuse me.
Do we move, or it's just recommendation, isn't it? We don't need to.
Yeah, I don't think there's a motion.
Yeah, there's no motion.
You have enough? I mean, we're basically approving the sketch plat and...
It's providing feedback to the applicant on anything you saw here tonight that might give you pause. If everything looks like it's in line with your codes and with what you expect to see, I think that's what the applicant would hear by hearing no comments, and they would feel comfortable moving forward.
Well, short of a motion, everybody in agreement?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you called out what has to still be looked at, and I think that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, come back with the preliminary stage. Fox Point, sketch plat, another sketch plat.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, just like the last application, this is sketch plat review. Hawks Point, in this case, is located to the north of Highway 7, just south of Lake Minnetonka, one of our last undeveloped pieces of property on the Big Lake. If we zoom into the property in question, you can see that it's very heavily wooded throughout. We do have two access points. One is at the very southern end of the parcel, which provides a driveway going back to the existing house on this particular piece of land. And then we have a second access point way off to the west, kind of following the creek over here, providing access to a number of homes down on the lake itself. Like the last one, oh no, not like the last one. This one is zoned Lake Minnetonka residential, and they are not proposing a PUD at this time. They're just proposing straight zoning based on that district. The density here also meets your comp plan requirements. We also have adequate public facilities to allow this to continue, and they are proposing 14 lots total. For streets, they are going to need to have access off of Highway 7. There really is no other good way to provide access to this particular parcel. MnDOT has already taken a look at it, and they've indicated that the applicants will need to provide a level 2 design, and what that ultimately means is to be determined, but the applicants are aware that that would need to occur. It's really a landlocked parcel. Everything around it is pretty much developed, so they are looking to do a cul-de-sac. This particular cul-de-sac will exceed your maximum cul-de-sac length, but given the surrounding nature of the land, I see that what they are proposing does make all the sense in the world, and staff would be supporting a variance to that particular requirement in this particular case. Moving on to utilities, there is an existing 8-inch sanitary sewer line to the north that can serve the property. The one caveat with that is lift station improvements may be necessary, and at the neighborhood meeting, that was one of the main concerns we heard from the surrounding residents, is if this particular development impacts that lift station and it has to be redesigned and grow in size, that would be a major concern to them. So one of the pieces of commentary that we heard was if there's a way to access the main interceptor line down here on State Highway 7, that would be the preference of the surrounding neighbors. The applicants indicated they would be willing to look into that as they move forward. There's also an existing 12-inch water main down to the south and east, but it is quite a ways away and it would need to be extended. The applicants are weighing their options as to whether wells make sense or if extending water makes sense, simply to provide fire protection up in this area, and how much value does that add both to these lots and to the surrounding area. Topography is an issue on this particular site. This particular exhibit shows us where the 18% slopes are and where the 30% slopes are. And within your shoreland district portion of your code, there's a number of criteria which indicates where bluffs are on properties. And in this particular case, in working with the applicants, we have determined that we're going to have to work through bluff issues on lots 4 through 9. And how we're going to do that is really still being discussed and talked about. On 8 and 9, I don't think it will be as big of an issue because we do have such large lots. To access the lakeshore, they will have to use either a lift or a stairway. Where the challenge comes in is over on this side. Initially, we were hoping that we only had steep slopes over here, but the DNR has indicated, as well as the Watershed District, that the creek down here is the creek that connects Schutz Lake to Lake Minnetonka. And in looking at your shoreland district codes, it is specifically called out as a protected shoreland district water body. I've heard a number of times tonight that the city is pro-growth and wants to see things happen. So I think this is one of the major pieces of information we would like feedback on from the council tonight on, how is this a black and white issue for the council, or is the council more of the opinion that there's more than one way to skin the cat, if you will? If you talk to the DNR, they'll say that the only way to protect bluffs is with distance. But I'm a believer that there may be other ways to provide the same types of protection other than with just one solution. So I would like that feedback tonight since I haven't had that much opportunity to interact with this council. With regards to tree preservation, as I stated, there is very heavy tree cover out there, so we're going to need a tree inventory. And what we've discussed with the applicant is to do a combination mensuration as well as a specific inventory. And basically what they would do is identify a line beyond which they would not touch any trees. So every area, or all of the area within the red, we would use the mensuration method, so an averaging of how many trees are out in that area. Within the green area, we would actually get a specific inventory. So then for each lot, depending on the disturbance, we could calculate based on the average in the specific inventory how many trees were removed and calculate the replacement on that. Wetlands have not yet been delineated. Like the last application, they would need to go through the MCWD, and wetlands and buffers would need to be in outlots. Stormwater can be a little bit of a challenge out here, just trapping it all as much as you can. And you can see on this particular graphic the general direction that's intended for this stormwater. We have heard from Three Rivers Park District that they have the park on the other side of State Highway 7 where they've had a number of water issues that they want to limit in as much as possible the water going down there. And the applicant met with them and really met their requirements by proposing a way to get the water to a pond in the southwestern corner of the site where they would control volume and rate going into the creek, which ultimately would flow down into Lake Minnetonka. Parks and trails, there are no parks planned in this area, so again, cash in lieu would be requested. And we would just follow your standard city code requirements for that. And like the other development we looked at, the $2,500 per lot park improvement fee would apply. There are no public trails planned for this area, but that was another comment we heard at the neighborhood meeting that many of the residents out here would like to see something eventually along Highway 7. That was discussed by the Planning Commission, I would say again at length, and what I had heard from the commissioners was it's been discussed many, many times, but there's a number of different impediments to a state highway trail, which has really prevented the city from moving forward on that type of improvement to date. So with that, again, I will turn it back to the council for questions. Should the applicant feel comfortable with moving forward, they would eventually come forward with their preliminary plat and eventually a final plat.
Comments, council?
Kara, could you comment on the sewer component that was brought up in terms of having to improve a lift station or what's reachable for this?
So there is a pipe going to the neighborhood, but sewage would flow back to an existing lift station number 3, that then flows to lift station 4. So if the applicant were to move forward, one of the first steps would need to be reviewing those lift stations to make sure that any improvements aren't needed to accommodate additional flow. I just don't have enough detail in our historical data, but there is a pipe stubbed into what is pretty clearly a developable parcel, so it's entirely possible that the system upgrades that were done back in 2000-something, early 2000s, plan for this. The residents asking to connect, have them connect on Highway 7, that's actually one of the tunnels that was constructed by Met Council is located adjacent to the property. So I don't believe that would be viable, but certainly gave the applicant's engineer that information, and they were going to contact Met Council themselves.
Okay.
Other comments?
Can you elaborate on the stream buffer slope environmental issue?
Certainly. Let me go to 39. Oops. The stream, which is basically the connection again between Schuts Lake and Lake Minnetonka, runs along this kind of crooked property line, if you will, to the west of the property. And by your shoreland district codes, there are certain water bodies within the community that are provided shoreland district protections. A number of lakes throughout the community, and then also a number of tributaries. We had to do a bunch of research on the 9 tributaries in code, and this turned out to be one of them, which means around that creek, on both sides of it, 300 feet, shoreland protection pieces of code apply. And when we look at that section of your code, there are different regulations to protect what are called bluffs. And if you meet 4 different criteria within that code, then you have a bluff, and it needs to be protected. The standard way to protect a bluff is distance. From the top of the bluff, there's a 30-foot setback, and that's for all structures. 20 feet back from the top of the bluff is called a no-impact zone. So that's don't do anything. Don't build a pool, don't put a garden in there, just kind of stay out of it. You can do the walkway or the lift through there, but everything else is pretty much nothing. So the issue will be, is there a way to accommodate the number of lots that the applicant would like to get out of this and still be able to provide the bluff protections that code is looking for here. And I'm going to be held to the requirements of your code, the different provisions, and I don't know your code in and out as of yet, but we will be working with the applicant to see what avenues might be available. What would be important for me to know is if council views bluffs as a black and white issue. When I worked in Minnetrista, it was black and white. I mean, you met the distance, and that was the only way you were going to get around this particular section of code. This commission or council seems much more pro-growth than past councils that I've worked for. And if there are other solutions, I guess I want to know what support there is to try to pursue those other solutions.
So is that's a protected waters then?
It is a protected water according to your city code.
So then DNR weighs in, Minnehaha Creek, I would assume weighs in, and the city.
The DNR would be the main agency wanting to weigh in on this, since the shoreline district codes are really the statutes that they oversee.
Okay.
I guess I'm interested in understanding what the alternatives are.
Yeah.
And what the potential impacts are.
Yeah, can you tell me, are the red and green areas considered bluffs in the areas you would have to stay out of, or is it mainly the green? What is?
This was a generalized analysis based on LiDAR data, so we don't have the actual survey data quite yet, but it does give us a good indication that the top of bluff, which is 18%, The green helps us to know whether or not these lots meet one of the 4 criteria. There's green on all these lots, so that criteria is met. So really at the outer boundary of the red, that's telling us approximately where 18% is based on LiDAR data. Your code, if you read the actual definition of top of bluff, it allows you to go out on site and identify visually, where that drop off really occurs and put it there. So the 18 gives us an idea, but the survey is actually going to tell us where it is. And then we'll know exactly what impact buildability-wise do we have in these lots here, really from 3 to 6. Because wherever that bluff line is shown, it's a 30-foot setback.
So my question then is, if we want to approve something other than what our standard would be, would we be negotiating then with the DNR? The city and the DNR, or is it the landowner and the DNR, or what? Because to me,
the city has a shoreland district code that you put in front of the DNR. The DNR then had to find whether it was in substantial compliance with the statutes or not. I presume that process happened. The DNR has granted approval of your ordinance, so now you are really the body that enforces that code. The DNR has already said this code works with statutes at the time. The city planner in St. Mary's Point, and we came up against the DNR in a fairly similar situation where the DNR said you need to adhere to the newest statutes out there, and the city said, no, we have an ordinance that you approved, and that had to go through the court system. Our legal counsel can probably provide a better explanation of this, but ultimately the city was able to enforce the code as it was approved by the DNR back in the day. So we would have to enforce your codes as currently written. I don't know right now whether we have a good avenue to go down. We've been working with the applicant to see if we can find an avenue.
Did you want to address the council?
I would like to.
Feel free. And I remind you, please, your name and address.
My name is Rick Denman. I'm with Charles Cadenovo. I'm a principal there. I live in Minnetonka. We actually intend to stay within the code. In other words, I don't think we're going to ask for any reason to touch that 30% slope. We've been out there. It's pretty apparent where that starts. The setback requirements from that, I guess maybe we'll talk about that, but the way we're proposing it right now, I think we may end up losing one of the lots on this neighborhood, especially on Lot 5 where it comes up. We may change the road slope a little bit, but we've been working to figure out how we stay within that 300-foot protected area. It's probably workable for us to do that, and we're not asking at this point in time for anything other than maintaining that code.
You certainly have a unique property. I'd look forward to seeing how what the preliminary and final plats look like.
Yeah, well, those are and these are larger lots too. The square footage on those lots are quite large. I don't know if you can read the plats there, but we're looking at 125 feet, and then most of them are at least 200 to 350 feet deep. So
yeah, dynamite property.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece.
Okay, general advice to the applicant?
The report that's been laid out was written by your former planner, Ms. Kreft. I think identifies a number of different issues. I know I've met with the applicants on at least 2 different occasions to provide my input from a planning perspective on the issues that I'm seeing. The biggest issue being the slopes and meeting the bluff requirements, but we just heard from the applicant that they intend to meet those requirements. So provided they can do that and address the stormwater issues and the utility issues, this certainly has a good chance of moving forward.
Well, I would agree with that. Joe?
looks good.
Lonnie, Jim?
Good.
Bring it to preliminary. Work through the issues. Reports of the city manager.
I have none.
Reports of the mayor and council members. I'm going to ask for your indulgence, and I'm going to read a statement that I'd like in the record, and then I invite others, if we wish to address this topic, to speak up if they choose. As a point of information for Victoria residents and taxpayers, I want to provide an update on the financial costs involved in the civil suit brought by 7 residents against me and 3 city council members. The suit involves alleged violations of the state's open meeting law. The legal defense in this action is a very costly endeavor. An indication of the costs involved can be found in the extent of the initial document search, which required an initial review of 30,000 pages. The 4 of us accused have legal cost coverage amounting to a total of $200,000 provided by insurance through the League of Minnesota Cities. To date, we have incurred approximately $68,000 in total costs. These costs, of course, are borne by the residents and taxpayers of Minnesota. With a tentative trial date of mid-February, there is very good chance that the total legal bill for our defense could exceed the $200,000 coverage amount. Minnesota Statute 13D.06 states, quote, "A public body may pay any cost, disbursement, or attorney's fees incurred by or awarded against any of its members in an action under this chapter. Thus, any legal fees incurred by an accused council member can become the obligation of the city and not be a personal obligation of the council member." It should also be noted that Councilmember Pavelko, who is not a subject to the suit, has and will continue to incur legal costs, and these costs are not covered by the League of Minnesota Cities, but are direct costs to the Victoria General Fund. So far, these costs amount to about $6,000. It's also important to note that the complainants are incurring no financial costs, as their legal support is being provided pro bono or free of charge. The action brought by 7 residents, namely Thomas Funk, Carolyn Funk, Marvin Gregory, Jerry Osmondson, Jane Penny, Mark Bjornlund, and Karen Bjornlund, is a very costly action for Minnesota and Victoria taxpayers. That's the end of my message. Anybody else? Mr. Attorney, any comments?
Mayor and council, I don't. Thank you.
If there's no further, then I'll take a Joe?
Just an update on the Arboretum Trail.
Class 5 base is currently being placed on the trail. So the trail's been graded and they're putting class 5 down. We had a meeting today and the tentative paving schedule is next week. And once it's paved, there's pretty minor restoration to do along either side of the trail. So we are nearing open to the public stage very soon.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Take a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.